Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 7th annual Hartland Poetry Fest. A big shout out to all of you on Zoom as well. I am so happy you are here to celebrate poetry tonight. Today's poetry event is sponsored by the Hartland Community Arts with the Hartland Public Library. The Hartland Community Arts would like to thank Nancy Tisinki, the director, and Elizabeth Frederick, the community engagement librarian of the Hartland Public Library, for co-hosting this event. A big thank you also to Sherry Altman and Rebecca Siegel of Literary North for suggesting poets. Today we gather to celebrate National Poetry Month and hear from a myriad of voices in the Upper Valley. We also celebrate Poem in Your Pocket Day, so please take a rolled poem as you leave from the basket tonight. This year, 2023, our poetry theme is renewal, and you will hear from 6 talented local poets tonight. Our first poet that I would like to introduce is Megan Buchanan, and I will read her bio. Megan Buchanan's poetry collection, Clothesline Religion, from Green Writers Press 2017, was nominated for the 2018 Vermont Book Award. Her poems have appeared in the Sun magazine, Makeshift, A Woman's Thing, and Itinerant, and also featured on public display at Art at the Kent in 2020, as well as in other journals and numerous anthologies. Her interdisciplinary performance project, Regenerations, Reckoning with Radioactivity, was in residency at the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center this past winter. Her work has been supported by the Arts Council of Windham County, the Vermont Arts Council, Vermont Performance Lab, and the Vermont Studio Center. She lives in Putney and works with teenagers with learning exceptionalities. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is such a treat to be in person doing readings this year. We did a reading with the library a couple years ago, which was really sweet during Zoom to just even be able to have Poetry Month that way, so it's really special to be up here tonight on such a beautiful day. Okay, I'll read some poems there from different springs, going back in time to 2020. So this is, as she said, this is my book, and I'm not going to read anything from this book tonight, I guess, because it's kind of like, here's some new stuff. So this is, so I bought my first house in 2019, and it's in Putney, and so this is sort of about working on the house during COVID. And I'm a teacher, so it was really intense just to be home teaching and being a mom at the same time and figuring all that out real quick. Okay, Spring Fire, March 2020. For weeks, we dragged limbs across the rutted road to the bristled October-mown field. My carpenter partner like a modern dancer, his slow walk atop hard mud, arms full of boughs, early spring's satisfying procession. First year in our own place, we cleared and clipped with care. Crisp hemlock branches, thorny whips of raspberry, fallen willow branches like upturned hands, papery grapevine, lances of red sumac, skeletal Christmas trees yanked from tangled thickets, all crackle under a thick duvet of cloud. A tailgate bounty, blueberry muffins from the neighbors, our hazelnut shortbread wrapped in cloth napkins. Daisy shares her favorite watermelon juice with Ave. Her daddy's splashes of old gasoline mixed with rainwater saved the day. Nathan knocks a transverse birch from the tree line, hauls it to the blaze, stirring red coals and ash. The kids can't help themselves, inch way too close to flames. Our view from the lip of this tiny valley spans a 20-minute walk, a tiny ripple on the surface of Earth. But now we live within new distances. Diagonal lines of data drag across our dreams. Hunkered down, we burn what we can, check on the neighbors, slide seed trays beneath the wood stove. Hunkered down, we step with care into this darkness. We step forth towards what's breaking on the radio or inside of us. We step towards it, reach down and pull out from our pocket our stashed courage. We unwrap it. We step forward over embers, pricked up, listening under stars. We step with care, brush ash from our hands as our ready breath carries us towards whatever happens next. Oh, you don't have to clap, it's okay. Veranda Porch says that we make the poetry noise. We go, which is like, or then there's snapping. Okay, then we went to Monhegan during COVID. So this is a poem about Monhegan. I'm from California, and so I really, I've been out here for 13 years, but Monhegan is special, and it was my first time. So here's a little tiny Monhegan poem. Three-headed dandelion and honeysuckle wave good morning 12 miles out in the Atlantic. Snow in summer gallops across the limestone. My sweetheart paints the sky. Up high, lighthouse, water tower, white pine, flagpole, seagull. Down low, beach rose, buoy, stone wall, gravel path, sand. Sunday morning, I'm hand stitching and hear church bells. I grab sandals, run downhill towards the sound to find my people singing. Yesterday evening, I washed my silvering hair, combed it, then dried it in the late spring wind. At dawn, hot pink streaks overhead reverb on the calm harbor and stir the lee of me. I should tape that for Veranda. Okay. Okay, so one sad one and then one Ireland one, which isn't really sad, it's just Ireland. Okay, so here's, so I think it's pronounced, is it Bucha or Bucha? The town in the Ukraine? It's B-U-C-H-A. Well, it's that.
They can say Bucha.
Bucha, yeah, okay. So this is from last April. I never mind being awakened too early by cardinal song. I step out in bare feet onto the stone patio, look left to see the green pond shimmering, ripples where the spring water enters it. I spot the first turtle of the year, the glossy black shell resting on a half-submerged branch. Two salamanders shimmy along in the shallows, so super alive in the warmth. I think about the conversation last week with the landscape crew boss, a kind father in heavy boots. We surveyed last year's wildness, now in the way of daffodils. He frowned at the widening hedge of bee balm. It's not rocket science, we just scrape it down to the ground and add grass. When I winced, he said I could use conservation seed, and I breathed in, nodding. But today I'm stalled out by the news, but sitting down to honor the sunbathing turtles living their lives quietly, better when I'm not around to watch or plot with men who might bring heavy machinery. The turtle reminds me of the grandmother in Bucha, who once baked bread and checked on her relatives, and whose photograph in the New York Times today shows her weeping in her garden where 3 dead bodies lie at odd angles, 2 men she knows and 1 stranger. Her kitchen smashed, her sweet stone-lined pathway crisscrossed with horror. My God, oh great, I don't know what, you know me and my incessant, redundant prayer. Somehow I know you hear me, my offer to be useful in your great mysterious design. It's Monday, and I'm saying it again. I love this world, it's flying past, I'm halfway through, I'm still here, I'm open. What do I do with this? Okay, so then I went to Ireland last March for a writing retreat, and this is a poem. Look, this is an Ireland by Train poem. my family's from the west of Ireland, and I was in the east for the kind of like the first time for a while. I used to live there in the west, but this was a train ride from Dublin to Wexford, which is so pretty. It goes right along the ocean. Okay. Behold these miles and miles of stone walls. Imagine the hundreds of hands that placed each stone. 1,000-year-old place names on signposts in Gaelic whisk past me. And it hits me how every place is so simultaneously alive with life. And here, gorse, nettles, ivy, blackberry burst forth. All this life with its own strong soul. The train, the glass, and even the soft fibers of my clothing between us. The hum of life right there is right here, soaking into me. Security cameras film the pigeons. Daffodils rock in unison as the train passes. Below in the harbor, wrapped up sailboats rest. Coffee shops blink open after dawn. Off-leash dogs charge the waves. All the windows glow that face the sea. New lambs sleep beside their kin, and hawks watch from the hazel. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Our next poet is Rob Foote. Robert S. Foote is a retired physician and has lived in Hartland for many years. He is the author of a number of scientific research papers and essays and has been writing poetry since high school. His poems have been published in Dartmouth Medicine, Annals of Internal Medicine, UCLA Anthology of Poetry by Physicians, the San Diego Reader, various literary journals, and on the Writer's Almanac on National Public Radio. Welcome, Rob Foote.
So, happy to be here again tonight. I guess many of you know that I spent many years practicing medicine, which is a great privilege, and it's also an ongoing education in humanity and the endless varieties of human nature and human understanding. And anyone given to writing will find those experiences creeping into one's work. So the first poem that I would like to read is an example of this. And it's called Franklin. The smell of urine hung about him like a friend. Manure and milk shed, muck yard, morning coming in a black fog, darkness by the barns, dank rising steam of his beast breath. His clothes were woven of it. White jets that danced within the snare drum of his pail, for years had mustered mornings, marched the evenings down, a drum unneeded now, for in his barn a strange calliope with but one tune now played the airs, sucked down its silver whistles, the lactescent stream unseen now even by this man, this husbandman, for 8 years gone. Milk gone and hands on swollen udders, gone and gone the drum, and more gone too. But not this pungent cloud, not gone the dung-smeared floor, and beast dung drying on his black boots, not gone. This named him well, this husbandman. He never missed an afternoon. Long past walking, Dorothea lay, her belly daily swelling like a cow dying of black leg, but pain-free now, no torment now, but suffocation, tubes in her sides, needles, nausea, nameless things, the dreadful end. Beside her, every afternoon, this man, attending. More than once at first, until they knew him, her nurses had attacked the excremental air with aerosols, afraid the smell was human. He intruded thus, the husband of a woman dying in our care. 500 years of common life here coming to a gruesome end, undreamed of, all the days of living. Clatter of dish upon dish, a screen door slamming to in summer, smell of pillows slept on, swelling of the glands, slow ooze of blood, lungs filling with a golden fluid. It could not be resolved. Far deeper into death than we, this man alone and soon to be alone, said nothing, held her bony hand, stepped out when asked, and brought the stench of waste of life into this white and sterile place. He soiled the clean waxed floor. His boots left mud beneath his chair. Many stirred and looked aside. When she was dead, the smell of urine hung about him like a friend. There's another element of healthcare practice that's a little difficult to convey precisely. Compassion for a patient and their loved ones is, of course, paramount. At the same time, one is confronted with situations and sights that would ordinarily induce strong reactions and feelings that interfere with calm and methodical thought. And because this calm and methodical thought is essential to fulfill one's duty to the patient, it is sometimes necessary to suspend these normal reactions and enter a state of mind made up of two mutually contradictory elements: compassion and distance. This can be very difficult. So the second poem is entitled The Sick. How distantly we know them, know their poses, lesions, numbers, signs of suppuration, know the X-ray shadow's implication, velvet plague the petri dish encloses. Watch the dancing stylus entertain with leap and wave across the checkered stage, profess upon infirmities of age, inspect, palpate, auscultate, explain. We come to them as from a parable. Functionaries of the high court, bringing word of sentence, long or short. True compassion is unbearable. What we know is there, but not inside. They know how life must shrink and jettison, burden and beloved, lost as one. Parallel we walk the dark divide. So, a question that often comes up in discussion with poets or other writers or artists, I suppose, is where do your poems come from? And of course, there are many answers to this question. All or most of them right, because there are many sources. It's also true that poems often bring together a number of seemingly disparate things. Indeed, this is one of their greatest strengths. Furthermore, poems, like any other art form, since all forms of art are exercises in exploration, often evolve as they are being constructed and sometimes end up in places not contemplated in their original intent. So I would like to share a little example and explication of how difficult it is to say just where a poem came from. So many of you know that a few thousand years ago, at a time now lost in the mists of ancient Greek mythology, Icarus was the son of Daedalus, who built wings with feathers and wax for them to escape from the labyrinth on the island of Crete. Daedalus cautioned Icarus not to fly too close to the sun because the wax would melt. And being young and foolish, he did just that. The wings melted, and he fell to his death in the sea. The legend of his death, however, stayed alive, and about 4,000 years later, in mid-16th century Flanders, Peter Bruegel the Elder made a painting entitled Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. A painting which at first glance seems all landscape and almost no Icarus. No one knows what happened to this painting for the next 350 years before it was acquired by the Royal Museum of Fine Arts in Brussels in 1912. In 1939, on the eve of the Second World War, the poet W.H. Auden viewed the painting in the museum and wrote a poem about it, or rather about what it portrayed, entitled Musée des Beaux-Arts, the first line of which is about suffering. They were never wrong, the old masters. 30 years or so after that, I read Auden's poem as a young man. I was, at the time, involved in the anti-Vietnam War movement, and among other activities, I was struggling to write an anti-war poem that would bring the prosecutors of that war to their senses. I did not finish it, but eventually they came to their senses anyway, at least for a little while. On February 24th, 2022, Vladimir Putin sent the Russian army into Ukraine. Thank you, Megan, for introducing this. In bringing unspeakable suffering and death to thousands of innocent people. In the weeks after the invasion, I finished that anti-war poem that I had begun over 50 years ago. I read this poem at last year's Poetry Fest, and I hope you will forgive my wishing to read it again, since my initial reading seems not to have had the desired effect. So I'm hoping second time lucky. And as a preface, I would also like to read Auden's poem, since I have incorporated many of his thoughts into my own. So this poem is Musée des Beaux-Arts by W.H. Auden. About suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters. How well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating, or opening a window, or just walking dully along. How, when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there always must be children who did not specially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of the wood. They never forget that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course anyhow in a corner, some untidy spot where the dogs go on with their doggy life and the torturer's horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him it was not an important failure. The sun shone as it had to on the white legs, disappearing into the green water. And the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on. And so this is that anti-war poem. It's titled Kharkiv, and there's a little epigram from Auden, which is about suffering. They were never wrong. On what great canvas will the next old master sketch the soaring arc of missiles in the boiling clouds that surge above the hearts of cities where the doomed children hide in basements, hold their animals like protective armor, see their mothers' anguished faces, cry out for their fathers? For this is no incautious Icarus that falls from this menacing sky. They are gardeners of a kind, these men. They love the fire flowers that burst into bloom on the dark earth, blooming and plowing. Love to spray the poisoned seeds from the rigid wands. Love the orgasmic explosion that sows a garden of death. As of old, there are many gods. Your God is Vladimir, a fearful man, an angry God who hates you because you do not worship him and because you love your children. He will kill your children, so you will bow to him. In Kharkiv, there are no lambs to sacrifice, no blood to smear on doors to save your firstborns. The only blood is your blood and the blood of your children. Houses are searched with leering curiosity. Fear will get you fine contempt, and the least escape attempt brings on the next atrocity. Somewhere in a cellar, blindfolded, hands lashed behind his back, someone waits in cringing terror for the next blow he knows is coming, but not from where, nor what already burning, bleeding part of him will be struck and struck until it breaks. Men do this. Men are doing this right now. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Traffic lights control the indifferent throngs, commuters, shoppers, walkers of dogs, walkers of children, merrymakers, businessmen in suits, each with somewhere to go, someplace in the all-constructed landscape. Not far away, tables are set, drinks poured, laughter is heard, baths drawn. A cat pounces. But in what great vaulted gallery a few bloody and utterly mundane centuries hence, when the next old master has caught it all, and they've hung the piece up on the wall, will well-dressed patrons come to view your suffering and your innocence? Point, but do not touch. Step back, please. Quiet whispers follow museum rules. The painter's skill will help to ease discomfort in the hearts of fools. See the brushstrokes in the Pleiades. The drug of time, the outrage cools. But for now, the missiles fly, cluster bombs sparkle in bouquets of death, mortars murder innocents, buildings explode, rubble crushes children, while the drooling and depraved god, Vladimir, smiles and dreams that he is strong in the temple of your suffering, about which they were never wrong.
Thank you, Rob. Our next poet is Ray Keifetz. Ray Keifetz is the author of 2 poetry collections, Night Farming in Bosnia, Bitter Olinda Press 2018, winner of that press's Library Poetry Award, and Museum Beasts, forthcoming Broadstone Books. His stories and poems have appeared in the Ashland Creek Press, Briarcliff Review, Gargoyle, Kestrel, Osiris, Phantom Drift, Rhino, and others, and have received 3 Pushcart Prize nominations. He lives and writes in rural New Hampshire. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you. I was very excited to take part when it was suggested to me that I could read here tonight. And then I found out that the theme was renewal, and like mostly I do like calamities and disasters. like Night Farming in Bosnia, my first book was looking back at what happened in Bosnia, and it could have been looking forward had I known to night farming in Ukraine. But anyway, I really combed it and I found something to read. Fugitives. Not a word the entire day came between us. Stones had more to say. At home, the coffee was too cold. The coffee was too hot. It burned your tongue. Super sent up too much steam. He sent up no steam. You banged on the pipes. Men welcomed you on the street. They turned their backs. Your family, too. But here on the trail, your slightest nod poured scarlet cardinals, your eyes blinked thrushes, your fingertips raised loud ravens and jays, and perfect snowflakes touched our faces. We didn't need a wand or a single magic word, just a longer trail, a deeper wood, and arms to carry the first to fall. So in my new book, I've been really writing a lot about extinctions and basically kind of a fantasy of can we bring the creatures back that we've destroyed. to restoring an exhibit. They've been gone so long, we repair the cage for even one broken beast. None of us can sing their songs. We can't remember how tall they stood, what flowers they bore. None of us can tell you where they are. All our lives, we cupped our ears to the wind wailing through the mesh, spread nests high and low, sprinkled seeds, lit candles. All we have are fading tracks from their gate to ours, winter after winter, innocent flocks waiting for us to unlock, slip out, follow. So I had this uncle who was always giving me great ideas for poems and stories. And I was always saying, no, I don't think so, no, I don't think so. And he had this one idea, oh, just imagine in the park there's this old tree and it was looking at all the things it witnessed in its life. I said, no. Anyway, lo and behold, I wrote this poem from the point of view of a dead tree, and it's called Winter Kind. All summer stripped, abject, gaunt against green, we endured the leaves. Come fall into shadow, we stood off to one side, while others lost themselves to slow brown burning. Snow came and cleansed us closer, old wounds, rot, every trace powdered white. We stood tall again in our places. Craving buds, we welcomed vultures. Though hollow, there wasn't a blossom we couldn't bear. I'll read one more. This one is called An Admission of Cures. The cures are all around us. The pale young woman talking to the grass was once a flower. She could face only the sun. Now she stares at everyone. Before their admission, the sparrows singing through her hair were silent in the gutter. The weeping willows bent low was listening, a husband and angry brothers. And in the dining room, the meaningless food, the noisy frogs at your table. Soon enough, they will be returned to their ponds. The scarecrows in the halls are all but shadow. They pass through us, and we through them like leaves from different autumns. The telephone in your room requires no answer. The cures are everywhere, in the pigeon wings fanning your swollen feet, in the wood's faded markings, and on this beaten bench where you sit and wait the final sifting. No, Mother, nothing is calling. The wind is not interested in us. We must follow in full light or no light, the gaze of the trees down to the river. Who can say if those be swans or sails, and these still wide waters the shortest route home or to the sea? Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
Our next poet is Hatsy McGraw. Hatsy McGraw has written poetry for over 30 years and has published in several literary magazines, including the Anthology of New England Writers, Bloodroot, Hanging Loose, The Salon, and Across Borders, as well as the anthology Birdsong, Poetry Centered in Vermont. In 2004, she won the Robert Penn Warren Prize for Free Verse. Hatsy lives in Hartland, Vermont with her husband, painter Tom McGraw, and their two cats, Leon and Dolly. Is that Dolly? Okay. Welcome, Hatsy.
Well, first I want to say thank you to Hartland Community Arts for inviting me to read today, and also to the Hartland Public Library for providing the space for this program. And I also chose some poems and then realized that the theme was renewal. So I went back and chose some different poems. This one is called La Lune de Miel, or Honeymoon, and it was inspired by a honeymoon 41 years ago. They were tired midday in the French village. Restaurants shuttered, stores closed. August. Proprietors on holiday. They were hungry, having toured the chateau, climbed marble stairs, circling back and forth, in upon themselves, heraldic shields inlaid into stone, cold floors. Desperate for lunch, temperature swung up and down, back and forth. It was his fault for forgetting how civilized people were, stopping in the heat of day to break from commerce and tend to the business of food and rest. Her fault for not reminding him to purchase something earlier, bread, cheese, a hot croissant, to stave off the inevitable pangs. They walked not hand in hand, but feet apart, wishing for air conditioning, even a Burger King. Strawberries saved them. Succulent fruit, smaller than those at home, piled high on slanted trays outside a grocery shop. They bought 2 boxes, overflowing, berries unwashed, and picked within the hour. To eat, they settled in a grassy field, legs nicked by stiff bramble. Neither spoke. They ate alone in silence until he, or was it she, offered up a berry, the choicest of the lot, crimson juice staining fingers, held it to her lips, or were they his? And the taste was sweet. Oh, that's the veranda noise. So that poem came from this book, Perhaps It Was the Pie, which my poetry group and I put out in 2014. I still have some here. I'm going to do a little sales pitch. I brought some, and please feel free to take one home with you. The only thing that I ask you consider is make a donation either to Hartland Community Arts or the Public Library if you take a book. So the next one that I'm going to read is called Epiphany, and this was actually inspired by a concert at the Hopkins Center we went to a few years ago. Brad Meldau was playing, who's a jazz pianist, and he did a rendition of a song by Neil Young called Don't Let It Bring You Down. Probably some of you know that. And so, I don't know if it's epigram or epigraph, but I have a quote at the beginning of the poem, which is, "Don't let it bring you down, it's only castles burning. Find someone who's turning, and you will come around." 1. And so I saw the world in the sharpness of light, blue moving water, water by the beach, water against this or that green shore. I knew after family cabins, stick-style houses, beds made up in quilts, rooms lined with pine paneling, that this was the bay and I was on my way to the other shore. The way the sun shone over the water, the exuberance of seabird calls, and the brightness of the place, surely I was in some promised land. 2. We got separated, my husband and I. I strolled the rolling streets, peered in windows, felt I had been here. I owned this place from another time. And there was a moment when I turned around inside myself, said, I'm still here. I entered an arcade, seduced by sparkling dresses, hesitated. I saw him coming toward me, my husband, saw him through a large glass door. He waved his arms, did a little dance for our reunion. A stranger spied the signal and began to sing. Hey ho, nobody home. A second man joined in, and soon it became a 4-part round. 3. And then there were quilts, maybe from that little store, and I wondered, could these men be homeless? Because my friend said when she went to California, there were lots of homeless people by the road, and there were 2 quilts, not enough to go around. We gave the men the quilts, one red, the other pink, spotted with gray marching elephants. So where's my last stanza? Sorry. And now the sun shines even in New England. Although the yard is littered with limbs, broken arms and legs of winter, we'll drag them into a neat pile, then load it in a pickup truck. One spark, and it will come alive, fuel for a bonfire to celebrate the summer season. We fed the cat his medicine, California orange flavor, sure to cure all ills. And I have no reason to complain. After all, spring has come again. That poem is going to be in our next book. Our group is working right now on our second book, hopefully to be completed soon, because I'd like to stop editing and I'd like to get back to writing. The final poem also will be in the book, and I just would like to dedicate this poem to Joni Cole. And I don't know if any of you know Joni Cole. Joni is a writer and teacher and the founder of the Writers Center in White River Junction. And this week she had an article in the Rutland Herald about National Poetry Month. And she also pointed out it is National Humor Month. And if you have read the article, you'll understand why I'm dedicating this poem to her, and if you haven't, do read it. This is the only prose poem I have ever written, which is why it's dedicated to Joni. It's called Herringbone. He left his keys on the train, so when he disembarked at Darien, he had no access to his Volvo SUV and his cell phone. Alas, an older version of Smart had a dead battery. The train was late, the later train he'd taken because of the drink, the few extra drinks he'd taken with his boss and his boss's secretary, who was new and young, and the reason he left his keys next to his empty martini glass, not on the train. No colleagues commuted this late, no one to beg for a ride, so he'd have to walk the 1.5 miles home. As he walked, his footsteps, those of his expensive tassel loafers, beat out a tune. McTavish is dead and his brother don't know, and his brother is dead and McTavish don't know. Yet he knew his brother was anything but dead. In fact, his brother, predictably this Friday night, warmed the third stool from the left at a bar in Jersey, the Lone Star Bar. Not an apt name, but decent drinks. While making a pass at a waitress. She was ripped and may have been gay, but there was no sure way to tell just yet. And by the way, maybe never, because he was pretty wasted. His footsteps, the wasted guy who had left his keys somewhere, made a silly pattern with his footprints in those soggy tassel loafers, the motif opposing angles like the herringbone of his woolen jacket. All at once, he visualized the bones of an actual herring, and he felt he knew where the pattern had come from, and how everything in life was connected. The fish and the wool of his coat, his brother and himself, McTavish and his brother, life and death. At that moment, he reached his front door, fished his keys from his pocket, and let himself in.
Very good.
Thank you. And the last one isn't being published anywhere that I know of. It's a fairly recent one, and it is called I Would Rather. I think I wrote it during COVID, but I could have written this at any time. I would rather. A thick layer of dust lies beneath my bed. I know I could lower myself on bended knees, slide stiff muscles, joints, forward, and write my name in it instead of dragging out the vacuum, cumbersome beast. And after incantations, profanity-laced, push some magic buttons in proper order, make sense out of mess, But what a waste of time. Why not write verse on all the surfaces? Forget the mop. Let me dance in cursive over the sticky kitchen floor. Write my memoir, not so dirty, on the sideboard. Grab a cookie for my work. Where crumbs fall, no trouble at all to line them up like tiny housekeepers. March them in rhythm and rhyme towards the stairs where they catch in the carpeting, disappear in gray pile. All the while I trip lightly past, balls of cat fur flying in my wake. It takes no effort to compose this ode to enlightenment. What brings me joy? This stack of newspapers in a basket, this bin of trash, this last ribbon from the floor, now curled around my fingers like the letters of the alphabet. Thank you.
Thank you, Hatsy. Our next poet is Taylor Mardis Katz. Taylor Mardis Katz is a poet, farmer, and shopkeeper living in Chelsea, Vermont. With her partner, she runs Free Verse Farm, an apothecary, and a free verse farm shop, and parents one small and fantastic human. Taylor's poems has appeared in a variety of traditional and non-traditional publications since receiving her MFA from San Diego State University, including a Farmer's Almanac, the podcast Brave Little State, the Connecticut Review, Barnstorm, and the Adirondack Review. Welcome, Taylor.
Thank you. This has already been such a delight to hear, everyone. So much fun. We're here finishing out Poetry Month. I'm so glad you could all come out and enjoy the last gasp of it. We poets get like a little attention. We get a little busy during this month. It's very nice. We have engagements. People look us in the eyes and don't worry. They're just delighted for us. I once was waitressing, and I had finished serving this woman, and we had this beautiful rapport, and she was leaving, and she was an elderly woman, and we just got along really well, and she said, "By the way, what do you do outside of working at this restaurant?" And I said, "I'm a poet." And she went, and she gave me $5 right there. And I took it. I said, "Thank you so much. I need it." And she actually didn't tip me very well at all, but then she was so worried about my future as a poet. So, yeah. So I'm going to read a couple of poems tonight. I've been a waitress many times, and that will come up in one of these poems where I basically tell you the entire story of my life in little tidbits, and then you can ask probing questions later when I entice you with the details. This first poem is called Song of Friendship. I live at the end of a long dirt, very steep dead-end road, and I run an herb farm, and we kind of have the one side of the road, and then my neighbor has the other side. And we live in the house that her parents once lived in, and the whole property used to be unified, and now it's sort of unnaturally split. And her property is a smaller house, a big red barn, and a beautiful pond. And from my house to the pond is a 4-minute walk, but being over there, I have the exact opposite view of the valley, and my house and farm and messes are like the perfect amount of distance, and it just feels like being in a completely different world. And I've spent a lot of time there, especially raising a little person. I remember when he was like tiny, it was like I was out there at 7:22 with a cup of coffee. So this poem is set at that pond, which is both right next to my house and also sort of like a parallel universe where I have nothing to do except sort of look at the turtles and raise my child. Song of Friendship. We raise our kids in the water. First the water of our bodies, then in summer, the body of water closest to our homes. At the pond today, we were 3 moms with 4 kids. One of us in a bikini top and red gym shorts. The other fully clothed, insistent she couldn't find a suit or a single piece of clothing that wasn't black. We believed her. I believed her 4 months ago when she said, with half a smile, that the best thing about having a second child was not having to worry anymore about whether or not she'd have a second child. Because all the math we learned in school was only half right. 1 + 1 is 2, as well as 3, a newfound family. Adding more equals 4 also equals forever long until the song of someone asking for a snack recedes like birdsong in fall. At the pond today, all of life was lived inside a few hours. A frog caught and caught again, a drowning averted, 14 truths between us, and a single bag of chips. We get old, we get young, we get old again, in the course of a single day, thanks to our children, in honor of our children, in the presence of each other. Renewal, right? We get old, we get young, we get old, and then old, and then young. This is a poem thinking about June, thinking about when summer is sort of coming at us. This time of year, every year, I always have that night before Christmas sort of feeling where like the best is yet to come. The buds are just starting and the flowers aren't here yet, and it's just like, oh yeah, it's all coming towards us. This is called Tomorrow's Catbird. This is how June comes. First, the lilacs overtake the air with sweetness. Then the streams run louder than the trains. At dusk, the frogs scream their glories. You build a nest, or plan to, until those plans are drowned by rain. Not that the plans matter at all. All that matters is, it is dawn. The project of your life as you've imagined it exists. The exact dimensions, not exactly. The bricks, oh yes. The bricklayer, you, crouching on ground so level a grape would stand stock still. From this place, you can't hear tomorrow's catbirds, but you are certain they will come. This next poem I'm excited to read because I've been working on it and tinkering with it for the past couple of weeks, and like when it's not with me, I'm mad at myself that it's not with me. Like I used to always carry around the copy of a poem that I was working on, and I don't do that as much anymore. And this poem, I'm just thinking about it all the time when I'm not with it. And it's partly because I'm trying to fit my entire life into it, and that's a fun project. And so I'm really excited to read it and sort of just like get it out there. A few things before I read it is that you're going to think it's over, and then I'm going to keep going. And the other, there's just a word in here which is yahrzeit. In the Jewish tradition, the day that someone dies, you sort of commemorate at their yahrzeit. You light a yahrzeit candle. So that's mentioned in here, so I wanted to preface that. Before I read this poem, I was talking with a friend about silence and how we use silence, and how silence is utilized as a tool and also as a balm for the soul, and how not good I am at it. All rise. A moment of silence for all the selves I've lost to time or inner wars. The one who is going to be a professor, a rabbi, a magazine editor. The one who threw up in broad daylight, pregnant, mortified, a plastic bag of orange puke tied and left on the curb. The one who walked away from college thinking we'd all still sleep next door, cackling in a shared bathroom until the end of our days. The California one who wore sunglasses and jumpsuits year-round. The one who donned a blonde wig on Halloween, hoping she'd fool everyone, though she only fooled herself. The one who wrote daily poems in Brooklyn to remember how she lived when she was with her favorites. The one who believed one person could hold everything, who believed a person could go through life without enacting any harm, who thought of only one person for so many days, their name was like a snake eye that never blinked. The one who didn't believe death would come for the beautiful ones. The one committed briefly to outfit notes, morning yoga, a daily spiffing of the desk. The one who sold milking systems to dairy farmers, and all the waitress ones. The Cape Cod stoner, the lunch shift one, the one who wouldn't call herself a waitress, who served cocktails overlooking the Hudson, dreaming of the train she'd take to the city, where the boy she'd nearly kissed threw his arm around her like an owned thing. The woman who wore white go-go boots in all weather. The one who wanted to write somebody else's poems instead of her own, who drove cross-country for poetry, who scanned and scoured for someone's choices she could follow to a T. The girl who wore shirts with words on them, and the girl who tied a silk scarf across her chest, called that a shirt. The one who lived for the weekly recap of a bad television show, who got everything done thanks to a single saving song, who thought she could learn to look clean on short notice, thought she could show up at a wedding on time with the right kind of shoes, could arrive at her own atrocities and have something to say. And to the selves who remain with me, who never age or drain of power, the selfish self, the sleepy self, the one forever heavy with hunger, the dishwashing daydreamer, the one who expects more than what comes, the one who longs to be known, known deeper, seen fully, seen in darkness, lauded annually by candlelight by her storied fans and beloveds, I raise no glass to you. To the self who covets all the love and then more, who expects what she doles out to return in kind, she's still with us. No need to light her yahrzeit. She's megaphone, lit as the summer solstice, sits like a New York pretzel on the couch, knows exactly where her wounds are and presses on them herself. She's got one whiskey on the rocks and another on the way. No need to boost this beast. She's living noise. I'll read a final poem, and I'm a farmer but a bad gardener. The month of April is about the only time when my garden gets any attention. I have energy to take on projects that will take 200 years, and I weed the whole thing, and I plant new things, and I mulch the thing, and then it gets ignored until this time next year. So this poem I was writing when I was thinking about what we sort of intend to do with our gardens or our lives and what happens. It's called Not Ruined. Like everyone, I'd planned to live a perfect life, free of mistakes. In my garden, I'd plant everything in time, into well-amended plots. There would be no seedlings gone crisp in their pots, no ripping up wrongs by the roots, no invasives whose unseen seeds roamed in on the wind or hid out in bird shit, their progeny popping up along the road a decade later. I would not regret my roses, the ranunculus, or the spacing of stems. All my failures could be explained by referencing weather. You see, I was going to live in love and break nothing but bread. But here I am, alive among a decade's worth of death by neglect. Here I am with one broken hose and a host of starts that never took. Here I am with weeds taller than I'll ever be, bleeding between the toes from a broken poppy pod whose hardened crown sliced me like a paring knife. Here I am, somehow, with more than one chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Our next poet is Alan Haehnel. He's a teacher, playwright, director, and spoken word poet who lives in Hartford, Vermont. Recently retired from teaching English for 31 years. His focus has turned to poetry. He is currently presenting his one-man multimedia show, My Ode to Joy, at various locations around the Upper Valley. Alan, come on down. Can I help you? Pull that out? Okay, do you want help? Good.
Working all right. I want to thank Christine for having me go last. Gave me plenty of time to sit there and be thoroughly intimidated. You'll notice that in the introduction she didn't mention any of my publications as a poet, because I have none. I pretty much function, I realized as I was sitting here and admiring all these people relying just on the word, that I work through the principle of distraction. So I use video and music and some theatrics and so on to keep you distracted from the fact that I'm just not very profound at all. So here we go. This first one is called Going Dark. Oop. Technical difficulties. I'm looking through the window, out into the yard. I see the old black dog has returned. From all the things I should have known, he's dragging pretty hard and limping from the bridges I've burned. I've fallen short again, gone wide of the mark. As the margins slim, the evening light is getting dim. I can feel myself going dark. I'm sorry for the mist I'm bringing to the valley, the early frost that's blackening the vines. You always come and kiss me and tell me not to worry, but I know you feel the loss. I can sense your sigh. I've fallen short again, gone wide of the mark. As the margins swim, the evening light is getting dim, and I can feel myself going dark. But who is the one taking measure? And why condemn the night? If, as you say, each moment has its treasure, I guess that I can simply breathe. I guess that I can take my ease. I guess that I have nothing left to fight. I'm going for a walk with the old black dog. We'll take it slow down the easy path. And maybe he'll just wander off into the thinning fog. But darling, please know this. Your loving makes a life I couldn't bear to miss. For a while I'm going dark, but I will be back. For a while I'm going dark, but I promise to be back. So this next poem is called Real Estate. Broke, young and hungry, eager, roaring and hot. I was ready to go out and get whatever there was to be got. Heading out to grab the world by the horns, I stopped to get some supplies. when I almost tripped on this raggedy dude. He looked me in the eyes. Man, I said, I got nothing for you, but hit me up when I come back. By the time I roll again down this street, believe me, I'll have a stack. Well, he just smiled and shook his head. He just laughed and asked instead, how firm is your foundation? How solid are your bones? Like the proverbial turtle, son, you carry your home. Well, I had no time for philosophy from a man showing signs of vagrancy. You stay here and spout your words, you homeless dirty bum. You stay here while I go out and get me some. Some sex, some cash, some stocks and bonds, closets full of clothes I'll be styling. By the time I come back, I'll have me a mansion on my own private island. So I took off in hot pursuit. No such thing as forbidden fruit. No tune on my horn that I would not toot. I wanted my fortune, my island castle, and I was ready with any hustle. Endured all manner of hassle just to get me to it. Whatever it took, damn me, I would do it. But, much to my surprise, in dreams or in desperate sessions, I remembered that old man's eyes and every word of his questions. How firm is your foundation? How solid are your bones? Like the proverbial turtle, son, you carry your home. Well, I bartered, I dickered, I pawned, I pulled out my teeth for the gold. By the time that I was bankrupt, I'd even pimped out my soul. I woke up on the street at the feet of the Raggedy Man. He didn't need to bother to ask. My throat was parched, but I managed to gasp. I have no foundation, no marrow to my bones, and all the circling birds have come down and picked me clean as a stone. Well, he laughed a little to sand the edge of my despair, and he laughed some more as if to say he'd been there. Well, you're here and alive, so it's not too late, the old man said as he picked me up. And now that you've reached the bottom of your dive, let's talk about your real estate. The kind that can't be lost on a bet or fed to the wolves at the door. The kind that fills you up instead of leaving you wanting more. So there on that street that I'd run away from, with that man that I treated with scorn, I began to grow to a place where I could, at last, be reborn. Well, I'm a little worried about this next one. It's pretty new. It's called Let There Be. I'm afraid it's a tad on the emo side. But, oh well. I mean, you know, I taught teenagers for 31 years. So you gotta rub off a little bit. Here we go. Let there be. All is burned, all destroyed. Once communion, now void. Once were words and touch, memory summons her witness. Never could there have been such. Here there was a clock, here a bed. How can there be nothing but nothingness instead? Impossible odds, terrible fight. Are there no gods to let there be light? Ashes and smoke, chaos and dust. If there's still you and me, how can there not be us? Sifting the debris, finding the remains, vibrant colors, blasted to stain, things that once gave form and frame, now just cinders and blame. Impossible odds, terrible fight. Where are the gods to let there be light? Ashes and smoke, chaos and dust, yet there's still you and me. Could there be us? There amidst the black and gray, defining the scene, is there a glint? Is there a hint? Is there a glimpse of green? Impossible odds, terrible fight. We are the gods to let there be light. Chaos and dust and smoke, there is still you, there is still me. Let there be us. There is still you, there is still me. Let there be us. Yeah, that's emo. But it's fun. This last one I call Abundant Less. Give me no polished bench, rather a mossy log. No organ for accompaniment, but birdsong bursting through the fog. I have no need of ghosts to bring a still small voice. The seasons act as gracious hosts to guide my choice. And the mountains roar, the meadows join in holy choir. I don't know what God is for, I can rise no higher. Bless me with the best that comes from more abundant less. The flowers are my living saints, the trees my soaring angels. Seems the sun and clouds can paint, outshine the great cathedrals. What more need I know of death and then renewal? Then the wondrous colored show of that timeless duel. And the mountains roar, the meadows join in holy choir. I don't know what God is for, I can rise no higher. Bless me with the best that comes from more abundant less. I need no book as guide, the flowing brook abides. No human voice has more to say than does the night's array. While I use these paltry words, of course, they cannot ever capture the power of the source. Bless me with the best and the blessed rest that pours forth from more abundant less. That pours forth from more abundant abundant, less. Thank you.
So, thank you, thank you so much, Alan. So, Julie, come on up.
Oh, of course.
This is the community participation part, and then we're going to just circle back and talk, ask some questions of our poets.
Am I the only community person?
The only.
I am, oh my. Wow, that was amazing. I am in the presence of some amazing poets and writers. That was just so inspiring, and I do not belong up here. Really, I don't. But I answered a community call. Did not know what I was getting into. So, oh, hold your applause, seriously. So, here we are. There are many life events that inspire a need or a refreshing sense of renewal. I came across this simple poem, and it's feeling rather more Hallmark-ish at this point in time, that speaks to my my annual sense of renewal, a reawakening, a jumpstart to instill some hope and inspire change with the unfolding of every spring. The author is unknown, and it is entitled Spring Renewal. Take a deep breath of this fresh spring air as you listen to birds singing everywhere. Spring flowers and birds singing all make you smile, something not seen or heard in quite a while. After a cleansing springtime shower, the rebirth we witness will totally empower. As nature spreads out her springtime buffet, we'll be ready for whatever comes our way. Leave a trail of barefoot laughter behind you as you run and count your blessings one by one. Open your heart. Let the sun shine in. Feel the spirit deep within. Another long winter we have withstood. The springtime breeze feels so good. Open the windows, feel the warmth shared. With love in your heart, you'll always be prepared. It's time for renewal. Spring is in the air. Time to be free. Let down your hair. This moment we still never get to replay. We will never get to replay. So put on a smile and greet the day.
So, I wanted to just sort of wrap this up and ask if you have any questions of our poets. One thing that is a favorite recurring question that we've had for our poets is, how did you get started as a poet? Would you like to come up here and tell us? Yes, you would. Yes, go.
I mean, I'll stand with you.
Okay, come on.
Going together? Sure. We didn't prepare our answer.
No, we're just doing this because we only get to see each other like twice a year.
Okay, you start.
Okay.
Wait, what's the question?
How do we get started as a
Get
poet?
started.
I think it's just the way my brain works. And then I got to read poems probably like in elementary school, and I was like, oh yeah. So it's like these little, it sounds silly, but like a butterfly of a thought coming in or it comes flying out, and it's just it can only be that big. So it's just like it's one of those fully formed thoughts that is kind of in your head or coming around. I don't know. It sounds like Ruth Stone, the Vermont poet Ruth Stone, has this great thing about hanging clothes on the line, and the poem just like so she kept it comes out, what does she say? She
It
says,
comes in on the wind.
yeah,
right?
it comes in on the wind. I think about catching them on the breeze, but yeah, and then she has to leave the laundry and just run into the house and quick write it down. So I have that experience, and then I also have the experience of, it's just how my writing happens. Like I would be journaling, you know, just naturally as a way of processing feelings or just capturing the day, or, you know, as a kid. And then looking back even at my high school writing, they were like fully formed poems that I would look at them that way now. And I'm an English teacher, so actually today my students, they were editing odes that they had been writing in the last 2 weeks. Oh my God, they were so beautiful. There was one student who wrote about her cat and his one smoky quartz eye. And I was like, yes, Liza. You know, so it's just the way that for me, it's the way that I think. And so poetry just happens to be the form that fits my brain. Does that make sense? But I think there's a million different ways to be a poet or write poems.
Yeah, I mean, for me, watching a movie or like even being in real life right now doesn't feel as true as a poem a lot of the time. It's like when you write a poem, you're able to capture truth, like a truth of existence that isn't necessarily available to us in the everyday. And I feel like a lot of things in my poems didn't necessarily happen but are true. Like they have an element of truth in them. And so for me, like writing poems was a way to relay my experience and, you know, work through feelings, but also to like relay what it feels like for my brain in this world to be interpreting humanity and why we're here, and just to get at a sense of accuracy. Like poems feel very accurate to me, and I can tell you things straight on in a poem that like, and be honest in a way that I can't when I'm speaking normally.
Ross Thurber, this poet from Brattleboro, he says poetry is journalism. And I just think about, I don't know what God is, but I think that poems are like God with a, you know, with a Taylor accent, or, you know, whatever your names are, that it's just, we're just interpreting some life force that's happening, and everyone's poems tonight were so amazing. I just want to say that while I'm standing up here, that I loved listening to all of you. They should answer too.
So any Hatsy, do you have anything to say?
Do I have to get up front?
No. Yeah,
It's fine.
Because there's people on Zoom.
That's right. Thanks. I know that I've written poems since I was a child because I found a ballad that I wrote in 5th grade. I was mad at someone, so it was kind of against Amy. But at any rate, I stopped. I didn't write poetry probably again until the early 90s, when I first became a children's librarian and was reading a lot of children's books. And there's a lot of absolutely beautiful poetry in children's books. And I started writing, and sometimes I have those experiences where it just comes to me, but I also am someone who kind of needs big nudges. And so I take workshops. And the first one I took around here was at Lebanon College with a poet named Jeff Friedman. A long time ago, probably early 90s, 30 years ago. And I've taken many others, and I go through periods where I don't write at all. So, but we do know, Veranda, there are a lot of people in our lives, and in a lot of it, this is a small state. So yeah, so we inspire each other. And right now, I would say my inspiration for writing comes from my poetry group, and we've been together for 13 years. And I think they helped me survive the lockdown and COVID, because we became more intensely involved in a way over Zoom, because we were really disciplined about our writing during that period, and sent each other prompts, and whose week is it to do the prompt? And and we really did work hard, and I would say prompts helped me too. So yeah.
So I started out writing prose, fiction, short stories, and I even tried out a couple of novels and didn't get very far. I always loved poetry, but I could never see how I would even begin a poem. It just seemed something beyond me, like how you do it. And then I went on a trip out west to Lakota country, actually, because I was very interested in the Native Americans, especially Chief Crazy Horse. It was this kind of Crazy Horse pilgrimage, going to different sites that were connected with him. And one great battle, one of the few battles that the Native peoples actually won, took place at a place called Fort Philip Kearny. And so I went to visit Fort Philip Kearny. But because the Lakota were victorious and the United States withdrew from the fort, they burnt it down. So when you go to Fort Philip Kearny, there is no Fort Philip Kearny. There's just prairie, the Rocky Mountains in the far distance. So what you see, though, are like little stakes that the Park Service has just nailed into the ground. So there'll be a stake here where maybe the wall ended. Here's a stake where you could see where the gate was, and you reconstruct it yourself. And it just struck me, this is a poem. This is like a living, this is what poems are. You can be in the poem, and the words are just like these stakes driven into the ground. And it's all this other stuff that you bring to it. And so my first poem was Fort Philip Kearny. And I tried to write that poem that I had lived through. And that was my start.
Well, I would just say that I can date my awakening to not so much to poetry per se, but to the liberating power of words to when I was a sophomore in high school, and I went to a small school. We had a just classic old-fashioned education, and I grew up in the South, and I had a black woman who was a surrogate mother to me, and so under those circumstances, you can appreciate it didn't take long for me to start saying something is not adding up here. And but I didn't know, I couldn't resolve it, and I felt very conflicted, and I was hearing things that made no sense to me because, wait a minute, you're talking about my mother. And you know, things of this sort. And we read Jude the Obscure. And there is a scene, Thomas Hardy's novel, I'm sure many of you have read it. There is a scene when the young Jude has been hired by a farmer to protect his corn, is the wheat, you know, and the corn it's called, to protect the corn from the crows. His job is to, he's got a pile of rocks. His job is to throw rocks at the crows every time a crow lands and starts to eat some of the corn. Jude does his job initially, but then he starts to take pity on the crows. Thinks, well, there's so much corn here, they can have a little. And so he lets them eat some, and every so often he'll throw a rock, but they're eating more. And then up behind him comes the farmer and catches him sitting there watching the crows eating the corn. So he pulls out his cane, lifts Jude by the scruff of his neck, and is beating him, quoting the Bible, which of course I was raised on down there, quoting the Bible. And Jude says to himself, and this is Thomas Hardy writing this, I realized I had discovered the flaw in the terrestrial scheme. What is good for God's crows is bad for God's gardener. And those words liberated me. There really is a flaw in the terrestrial scheme. I'm not alone in saying I can't figure, there's something wrong, but I can't figure it out. And Thomas Hardy figured it out for me in that line. And from that point on, I thought words are the way out of this. And they've been, I guess, my way out of it ever since.
Oh, yes, it's happened again. I'm thoroughly intimidated. Look, I was born a middle child, and I was always afraid that I was being ignored, and so I had this insatiable need to say, I'm still here! And so I wrote plays, and then that kind of dried up, and I learned to walk on my hands, but I can't do that anymore. And then I retired, and I was lonely, and I'm like, who's paying any attention to me now? And so I started to write these poems, and then I would put them on YouTube, and I'd get an occasional person chiming in, and some of them really were bad. I mean, terrible. I look back and go, oh, I should erase that, but I don't know how because it's on YouTube. But anyway, I just keep doing it because it's fun. I have a great time, and I'm just going to keep doing it.
Good answer.
Well, thank you. Any other questions for me? I'm afraid to ask. If there aren't any questions, thank you so much for coming. Enjoy yourself. Take a poem. Take one of the poems for the poem in your pocket as you exit. But enjoy. Or come and look at books.